Racist socialite ruined the dress, thinking she was dealing with just another black waitress. Her millionaire husband watched as red wine exploded across the white fabric, a crimson stain spreading like blood on snow. Victoria Hartwell's lips curved in cruel satisfaction as the young woman frantically tried to dab away the mess. "Oops," Victoria said with feigned innocence, her flawless smile hiding a rotten heart. "What a pity that people like you don't know how to move properly in civilized settings." The Boston annual charity gala gathered the East Coast elite inside one of the city's most exclusive hotels. Austrian crystals shimmered overhead, orchids imported from Asia adorned the tables, and the gentle melody of a string quartet floated through the air. A perfect soundtrack for polished hypocrisy. Jasmine Washington, just 24, never imagined that accepting one extra waitressing shift would throw her into a storm of humiliation and class prejudice. A Harvard MBA student, she needed the extra cash to support her family and cover her final semester. Her natural curls were tucked neatly into an elegant bun, and she carried each tray with the poise of someone used to balancing weight far heavier than crystal glassware. Victoria Hartwell, however, was the sort of woman who treated charity events like personal fashion shows. The wife of real estate mogul Robert Hartwell, she enjoyed every perk of being born wealthy and marrying even wealthier. Her days revolved around luncheons, spa retreats, and shopping sprees that cost more than most families made in a year. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Jasmine said, her voice calm even as she stooped to collect the shards from the floor. "I'll have it cleaned up right away." "Don't worry about it," Victoria replied loudly enough for nearby guests to turn. "I imagine accidents are common when you hire this kind of people for important events." The venom in her words made conversations falter. Curious eyes turned, some shocked, others entertained by the spectacle of humiliation. "Perhaps you should consider more qualified professionals for events of this caliber," Victoria continued, her tone dripping with mock advice. "People who naturally understand how to behave in refined society." What Victoria didn't realize was that every insult rolled off Jasmine's shoulders, absorbed with the patience of someone who had faced far worse. Raised on Chicago's South Side by a single mother who juggled 3 jobs, Jasmine had learned early that true strength doesn't shout. It observes, endures, and acts when the time is right. "Of course, ma'am," Jasmine replied evenly. Her composure made Victoria frown, irritated by the lack of reaction. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of properly." As Jasmine walked toward the kitchen carrying the broken glass, she passed the main table where an elegant gray-haired man was watching. Their eyes met for only a moment, but he gave a subtle nod, as if seeing something no one else could. Robert Hartwell had built his fortune on one simple rule: observe people when they think no one's watching. And in that instant, as his wife mocked the young woman, he saw 2 things clearly: Victoria's cruel vanity and the quiet dignity of the waitress who refused to break. In the kitchen, Jasmine finally let her hands tremble as she discarded the shards. 20 minutes ago, she had just been a student trying to pay tuition. Now, something inside her stirred, a quiet determination, as though fate itself had chosen her for something greater than a night's work. None of the guests in that glittering hall could have guessed that the woman Victoria had just ridiculed carried secrets powerful enough to turn this humiliation into the spark of a story no one would ever forget. Victoria wasn't done. When Jasmine returned with clean towels and a fresh uniform, the socialite had already gathered a circle of admirers, women hanging on her every exaggerated word. "Did you see that?" Victoria declared dramatically. "The audacity of some people to think they can just infiltrate our events." Clearly someone in the organization didn't screen the staff properly. Margaret Wellington, heiress to a pharmaceutical empire, nodded eagerly. "Darling, you're absolutely right. Just yesterday, I had to dismiss a maid who dared to question my cleaning methods. These people need to understand boundaries." As Jasmine moved quietly among the tables, she could feel the sting of their stares. The group's laughter pricked at her like needles, each word sharper than the last. She replaced the glasses, head held high, hearing Victoria's voice again. "Of course she came back. She probably needs this job desperately." You won't believe what happened next. Imagine if it were one of our daughters being forced to work like this. At least she knows her place and didn't try to talk back. Victoria noticed Jasmine nearby and raised her voice intentionally. Anyway, girls, I suppose we shouldn't be too harsh. Not everyone is lucky enough to be born with a silver spoon and receive a proper education. What Victoria didn't know was that Jasmine had graduated summa cum laude in economics from the University of Chicago before earning her place at Harvard. That she had grown up translating legal papers for her mother, who scrubbed office floors at night to support 3 children alone. That by 16, Jasmine was already managing their family finances and had turned small savings into a fund that paid her younger brother's college tuition. Jasmine continued setting the table in silence, but Margaret couldn't resist joining the spectacle. "Dear," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "you understand that workers should remain discreet during events, don't you? Avoid drawing unnecessary attention to themselves." "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine replied calmly, meeting her eyes with quiet confidence. "I understand perfectly." Something in her voice unsettled Margaret. It was too articulate, too composed for the stereotype she expected. Victoria noticed her friend's hesitation and decided to double down. "Margaret is right." She stood, stepping closer to Jasmine with a cruel smile. "Perhaps we should have a quick chat about proper protocol." "You can read, can't you?" The question, laced with venom, sliced through the room. Conversations hushed, and every nearby guest turned to watch. "Yes, ma'am. I read perfectly well," Jasmine replied evenly, though her eyes gleamed with something sharper than patience. Victoria let out a shrill laugh. "Great. Then maybe you can read this for us." She picked up the event menu and held it out. "That way we can be sure the service staff understands exactly what's being served to the important guests." It was a cruel trap. Victoria wanted Jasmine to stumble, to mispronounce the French dishes, or to refuse and justify being thrown out. From the head table, Robert Hartwell felt a surge of anger and embarrassment. In 23 years of marriage, he had seen his wife's arrogance many times, but never this level of cruelty. Jasmine took the menu with steady hands. For a moment, she looked Victoria straight in the eyes and allowed herself a faint smile. "With pleasure, ma'am." Then, to everyone's astonishment, she began to read. Not only fluently, but with a flawless French accent, polished during her 2-year exchange program in Lyon, funded by an academic scholarship. Amuse-bouche de Grasse, gelée de champagne, suivi par le tartare de saumon aux truffes noires du Périgord. Her voice flowed smoothly, confident, and melodic. Each syllable carried the precision of someone intimately familiar with French culinary culture. Victoria's smirk faltered, her face paling as she realized her plan had completely backfired. Margaret's jaw dropped, and the surrounding women exchanged uneasy glances. "Et pour terminer, le gâteau Grand Marnier accompagné d'une vanille de Madagascar," Jasmine concluded, returning the menu with a serene smile. "I hope that was helpful, ma'am." The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria stood frozen, clutching the menu, utterly speechless for the first time that night. It was clear now the so-called waitress possessed a grace and intelligence that surpassed anyone in that glittering hall. At the head table, Robert Hartwell rose slowly and began walking toward the group. You won't believe what he said next. His eyes met Jasmine's for an instant, and in them she saw something unexpected. Not pity, but respect, and a hint of admiration. "Victoria," he said softly, his tone carrying a warning she instantly recognized. "Perhaps it's time we focus on the real purpose of this evening, charity." Victoria quickly straightened, realizing she had lost control. "Of course, dear. Just trying to make sure everyone understood the proper protocols." Jasmine gave a polite nod and stepped away to resume her duties. But Margaret leaned toward Victoria and whispered nervously, "Darling, perhaps we misjudged the situation." Victoria gripped her friend's arm tightly. "We didn't misjudge anything," she hissed. "Amic tricks don't change who she really is. And before tonight is over, I'll make sure everyone here understands that perfectly well." What Victoria didn't know was that Jasmine had spent the last 4 years collecting evidence of racial bias in corporate spaces for her MBA thesis. Hidden in her uniform were discreet recording devices. She knew civil rights law like the back of her hand, and every venomous word spoken that night was being captured in crystal clarity. As Victoria plotted her next move, Jasmine glided through the room with calm precision, carrying a secret far more powerful than anyone there could imagine. She had long ago learned that real strength doesn't shout. It watches, records, and strikes at the most devastating moment. Robert returned to his seat at the head table, but his eyes followed Jasmine. There was something about her, a quiet authority that no uniform could hide. None of the guests could have guessed that the woman Victoria tried to humiliate was weeks away from becoming the youngest senior analyst at one of the nation's most prestigious consulting firms. Every cruel remark was building toward a reckoning none of them would ever forget. Inside the hotel's opulent restroom, Jasmine finally allowed her hands to tremble. It wasn't fear. It was the rush of controlled adrenaline, the same feeling she remembered from defending herself on Chicago's South Side. She slipped a small digital recorder from her pocket and checked it. 23 minutes of crystal-clear audio, racial slurs, discriminatory remarks, deliberate humiliation, all perfectly documented. For her MBA thesis on racial microaggressions in elite corporate environments, this was a case study beyond value. But as she stared at her reflection in the gilded mirror, she realized this went far beyond academic research. Jasmine. A soft knock at the door.
Are you okay?
It was Robert Hartwell. She instantly recognized his voice, the same calm authority that had silenced the room earlier. For a moment she considered staying silent, but something in his tone, honest and regretful, made her open the door. Robert stood in the hallway, hands clasped nervously. "I apologize for my wife's utterly unacceptable behavior. There is no justification for what I witnessed." Jasmine studied him carefully. Life had taught her to tell the difference between pity and respect. In Robert's eyes, she saw no condescension, only shame and anger directed at his own family. "Mr. Hartwell, I appreciate your concern, but you need not feel responsible for your wife's actions." "Of course I do," Robert said firmly. 23 years of marriage have given me plenty of chances to correct behavior like this, and I've failed miserably." "Jasmine, may I ask you something directly?" She nodded. "You're not really a waitress, are you?" Jasmine smiled faintly. "What makes you think that? Your French is better than anyone's in that room, including university professors I've met. Your posture, your articulation, the way you carried yourself under attack." Robert paused. "Besides, I recognize intelligence when I see it." "I'm an MBA student at Harvard," Jasmine admitted. "I work as a waitress to help my family and finish my studies." Robert closed his eyes, clearly shaken. "Harvard? My God, Jasmine. Victoria attacked a Harvard student out of pure prejudice. Mr. Hartwell, this happens more often than you realize. Your wife only said what many people think quietly." "That doesn't make it acceptable," Robert said, emotion thick in his voice. "It makes it far worse. May I ask your area of expertise at Harvard?" "Analysis of systemic discrimination in corporate environments. My thesis explores how bias affects professional opportunities for minorities." Robert fell silent for a moment, then said carefully, "Jasmine, may I make a proposal? It might sound strange." 15 minutes later, they sat in a secluded corner of the hotel lobby, away from curious eyes. Robert ordered 2 coffees and lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. "My company, Hartwell Development, has been facing serious diversity issues. The board wants real reform, not just a polished image. We've had incidents recently, and it's clear we need a deep evaluation." Jasmine listened closely, her analytical instincts kicking in. "I need someone with your expertise to conduct an internal audit, hiring practices, promotions, company culture, everything. Someone who understands both the academic theory and the lived reality of discrimination." "Mr. Hartwell, that's very generous, but—" "It's not generosity," he interrupted. "It's necessity. My company needs real change, and you, Jasmine, are exactly the person who can make it happen. You won't believe how that offer would change everything." Robert slid a sleek business card across the table. "External consulting compensation. Competitive with market rates for specialists of your caliber. You'll have full independence over your methods and conclusions. Jasmine turned the card in her hands, feeling the weight of what it represented. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Because I've spent 23 years married to a woman whose prejudice I ignored, Robert admitted. Because I built a company that probably mirrors the same systemic issues you study. And because, after what I saw tonight, I need to do something meaningful, something that repairs even a fraction of the harm my family has caused. Before Jasmine could reply, Victoria appeared in the lobby, scanning for her husband. When she spotted them together, her face hardened, the smile she forced barely concealing her fury. "Robert, dear," she said sweetly, stepping closer. "I was looking for you." "What are you doing here with her?" "Victoria," Robert replied evenly. "I'm offering Jasmine a consulting position with the company." The air went still. Victoria's gaze darted between her husband and Jasmine, her expression twisting as if she'd just witnessed a betrayal. "You're joking, right?" She laughed, but it came out brittle and sharp. "Robert, she's a waitress." "She's an MBA student at Harvard," he corrected, specializing in the very field our company desperately needs. Victoria's complexion drained. "Harvard?" "Yes, Victoria," Robert said firmly. "The woman you publicly humiliated tonight is a highly qualified academic working to support her family." Jasmine watched the exchange like a social experiment unfolding before her eyes. Victoria's shock was palpable, but beneath it, Jasmine could see the frantic calculation, the instinct to protect her reputation. "Well, Robert," Victoria stammered, "even if that's true, we shouldn't make hasty decisions based on guilt." "It's not guilt," Robert countered. "It's competence and necessity." For the first time since the incident, Victoria turned directly to Jasmine. "Darling, I'm sure you understand that misunderstandings happen at events like these. Perhaps we should all just forget about tonight's little disagreements." Her attempt at diplomacy was so transparently desperate that Jasmine almost pitied her. Almost. "Ms. Hartwell," Jasmine replied smoothly, "there was no misunderstanding." "Your comments were perfectly clear." Victoria's smile wavered. "Of course, dear. But intelligent people like you must realize that sometimes social context can be complicated." "Actually," Jasmine said calmly, "people with my academic background tend to be very precise about context, especially when it involves documented racial discrimination." The word documented made Victoria's posture stiffen. "Documented." Robert's eyes sharpened. "Victoria, were you recorded?" Jasmine said nothing, but her silence was eloquent enough. In that instant, Victoria understood that the night had spiraled far beyond her control. "Jasmine," Robert said, rising from his seat, "I look forward to your response regarding the consulting proposal. My assistant will reach out tomorrow with the details." As they walked away, Jasmine overheard the faint beginning of an argument. Victoria's voice trembled with panic. She had realized too late that she had humiliated the wrong person, at the wrong time, in exactly the wrong way. Back in the restroom, Jasmine checked her recorder again and smiled. 23 minutes of blatant racial insults, followed by 15 minutes of frantic damage control. For her thesis, it was academic gold. For her career, it was the gateway to real influence, a chance to bring change from within. As she adjusted her uniform and glanced at her reflection, she sensed the shift within her. The humiliation meant to break her was becoming the foundation of something powerful. Victoria had tried to put her in her place, unaware she had just launched her into a position of authority that would redefine their worlds. The waitress was about to become the consultant. And soon, Victoria would discover what it truly meant to be evaluated in a world where merit mattered more than privilege. 3 weeks later, Victoria Hartwell woke up uneasy. Her phone flashed with 47 missed calls and hundreds of unread messages. Opening the first one from Margaret, she froze. "Business executive accused of racial discrimination. Viral audio exposes Boston elite." The headline from the Boston Herald was accompanied by a photo of her at the gala, her sneer immortalized in high resolution. The 23-minute recording was everywhere. Radio stations, news sites, social media. Every venomous word she had spoken about Jasmine echoed across the city, accompanied by outraged commentary and eyewitness accounts. Victoria raced downstairs, finding Robert in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a look she didn't recognize. Cold, resolved, final. "Robert, you have to do something," she pleaded, waving her phone. "This is a setup. That waitress is trying to destroy us." "Victoria," Robert said evenly, eyes still on his newspaper, "that waitress is now our new corporate diversity consultant. And after hearing that audio, I completely understand why our company needs her." Victoria's mouth fell open. "What did you say?" "Jasmine started yesterday," Robert continued calmly. "Her first assignment is a full audit of our corporate culture, including a detailed evaluation of all leadership positions. You won't believe what she uncovered next." Robert finally looked at her, his voice calm but cutting. "I imagine you understand the implications." Before Victoria could answer, her phone rang. It was Patricia Whitmore, chair of the board at the exclusive tennis club where Victoria had been a member for 15 years. "Victoria?" Patricia began without preamble. "The board held an emergency meeting this morning. Your membership has been revoked, effective immediately. The behavior in that recording is incompatible with our values." The call ended before Victoria could defend herself. Seconds later, her phone erupted with notifications. The Ladies Who Lunch WhatsApp group, her tight-knit social circle, was buzzing with messages, all about her. "I can't believe I was friends with someone like that. My daughter goes to Harvard. How many Jasmines has she humiliated without us knowing? James said he's cutting business ties with Hartwell Development." Her Instagram told the same story. 3,000 followers gone overnight. The comments were brutal. "What a disgusting person. Rich racist exposed. I hope she learned something from this." Then Margaret called, sobbing. "Victoria, Charles canceled the renovation contract. He said he won't work with toxic elements. I'm sorry. I can't be associated with this." By now, Victoria was trembling, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. "Robert," she cried, "you have to make that audio disappear. Sue her! Do something!" Robert stood, his expression unreadable. "Victoria, you recorded this. Every word came from your mouth. There's nothing to sue but your own cruelty." Her phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Harrison, director of the charitable foundation where she had served as vice president for 8 years. His voice was cold, professional, final. "Victoria, the board has voted unanimously to remove you from all positions, effective immediately. Hearing one of our leaders express such open discrimination was deeply disappointing." When the call ended, Victoria slumped into a chair, numb. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her reputation, her friends, her volunteer work, everything that gave her a sense of importance. "You know the most ironic part?" Robert said, folding his newspaper. "Jasmine didn't even have to do anything. She just let your own words expose who you really are." At that very moment, Jasmine walked into the sleek offices of Hartwell Development, impeccably dressed and carrying a leather briefcase filled with proposals. She had gone from humiliated waitress to respected consultant in less than a month. "Starting today," Robert announced at the department meeting, "Jasmine Washington will lead our diversity and inclusion initiative. She has full authority to implement the necessary changes to our corporate culture." The employees listened attentively. Many had heard the viral audio and understood exactly why she was there. Jasmine spoke with composed confidence. "My goal isn't to punish anyone," she said. "It's to build an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, no matter their background or appearance." Meanwhile, Victoria remained locked inside her mansion, glued to her phone as her social world disintegrated one notification at a time. Invitations vanished. Contacts stopped replying. Even Margaret, her closest ally, ignored her messages. Patricia posted a photo at the tennis club with the caption, "Celebrating our true values of inclusion and respect." Even Victoria's hairdresser canceled her appointment, claiming to be fully booked. That night, Robert entered their bedroom to find Victoria sobbing in front of the mirror. 23 years, he said quietly. 23 years I lived beside this and pretended not to see. "Robert, please," she begged. "Can we talk?" It was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Victoria. It was you, finally unfiltered. But this time, someone recorded it. He began removing his clothes from the closet. My lawyers will send the divorce papers tomorrow. The house is yours, but everything else will be divided by the court. She stood desperate. You can't be serious. Over a waitress? Over a Harvard student you attacked out of racial prejudice, Robert corrected. Over 23 years of cruelty I chose to ignore. Over realizing that my wife is the kind of person I've always despised. As he packed his bags, Victoria finally grasped what she had lost, not just her marriage, but the illusion of power her privilege had always protected. The next morning, Jasmine woke up in her modest apartment near Harvard, ready for another day that would shape the future of Hartwell development. Her phone was filled with messages of support from professors, colleagues, even strangers who admired her strength. What began as a humiliating evening had become a mission: to transform corporate culture from within. While Victoria's empire of appearances crumbled, Jasmine was building something real, with integrity, intelligence, and purpose. The waitress Victoria had tried to belittle was now defining what true power looked like. 6 months later, Jasmine was promoted to Director of Diversity at Hartwell Development, implementing policies that became a national benchmark for inclusion. Her private consulting firm expanded rapidly, guiding other corporations toward authentic change. Victoria, on the other hand, lived in isolation, divorced, friendless, and socially erased. Her public apologies only fueled more outrage. Every attempt to rebuild her image collapsed under the weight of her own past. Robert remarried, a civil rights attorney, and donated half his fortune to college, scholarships for students like Jasmine. At Harvard's graduation ceremony, Jasmine stood before hundreds of students. Never let anyone define your worth through their prejudice, she said. The best revenge is success. They never imagined possible. Victoria's audio was now used in university ethics courses, a living example of how arrogance can destroy privilege in a single night. Jasmine had turned humiliation into legacy, and legacy into change. If you believe no one should be judged by race, class, or origin, subscribe for more stories proving that underestimating someone can cost more than any fortune ever could.